Here we are in Coquitlam, in the same spot where I constantly see these scooters blocking the sidewalk. I complained to two bylaw officers, but they said they could do nothing because they were told to do nothing, even though there's bylaw on the books. As you can see, some concerned citizen has moved these off of the sidewalk in consideration of people with mobility issues. Now, I take a walk every day around this neighborhood, and I'm guaranteed to see at least 2 and sometimes 4 instances of these vehicles blocking the sidewalk. I've complained to City Hall already about this particular area, and nothing has been done except for one removal of these scooters. I've sent letters, I've phoned, I've offered the mayor to be interviewed about this matter, and no response whatsoever. It's obvious to me that the rights of people with disabilities is not an issue for them. I've noticed that these particular scooters don't have the instruction labels on them. The one I did see said, ride safely, ride on the road, don't ride on the sidewalk, wear a helmet, and ride sober. And it also said, do not block paths. Now, I think that every one of these should have a label on them that says, do not block the sidewalk. It would obviously go a part way to resolving the issue. We're here continuing our conversation about the e-scooters blocking sidewalks and causing problems for people with mobility issues and sight issues, and people in walkers, and even mothers in baby carriages. And I'm here today with a lovely lady who was interviewed by Global Television, and her name is Lelainia Lloyd. And she has mobility issues, and we're going to ask her a few questions about what she thinks about the situation. So, Lelainia.
Hi.
Hi.
It's great to talk with you today.
Great to talk to you. What have your experiences been so far with this e-scooter issue on the sidewalks?
So I moved into this neighborhood in January of this year, and I was really excited because I've moved into a fully accessible building and an accessible suite, which is wonderful. And I thought things were going great, and then I discovered that there were e-bikes and scooters that were being left all over the sidewalk in my neighborhood. Initially, the biggest part of the problem was that they were being left lying down in front of our building, like right at the entryway, which when you're a wheelchair user, those things lock when they're shut off, and they're super heavy. I don't know exactly how much they weigh, but they're impossible for somebody in a chair to pick up and move out of the way. And so we have a Facebook group for my building, and I mentioned it there and said, hey neighbors, can we please be careful about not leaving those lying there or blocking the entrance, because, we can't do anything about it if that's what we encounter coming home. And within a couple of days, the problem here was solved. My neighbors were great. And I sent a second message out saying, thank you so much for being conscientious about this. It's really made a difference. And, it's enhanced our ability to come and go freely. And I think it's important to catch people being good. But around the neighborhood, near the SkyTrain station, and sometimes just randomly on the street, I will see, them parked in places where they don't belong. There's designated parking by the SkyTrain that's marked off with just paint lines. It looks like a little parking space. And just around the corner from me here, there is a portable pad. It looks like a giant carpet, and that's another place where the scooter companies have made it a parking spot. In an area where they can't actually spray paint a parking area. So, there are places designated, but people are lazy, right? And they're not thinking when they're letting these things happen. And I know just after my interview with Global that people were talking about it on the Port Moody group, and I'm still on that because that's where I used to live. I've been in Tri-Cities for years now, but just different parts of it. And so There was a conversation going on there about, people flinging those things into the bushes, and also just on the border of Port Moody and Coquitlam, where the Port Moody sign is along the highway there. There is a whole strip where the scooters are left constantly. And so it becomes a battle between the two cities of who's responsible for that. And so that's another issue. Fortunately, I had a conversation with Matt, who's on city council, and he said that, that's something that they're actively working on. So it's good to know that we have allies in city council that are willing to step up and address some of these issues. I'm not against e-scooters or e-bikes, but I really wish that there were more enforcement of what they're allowed to do. Some of the issues have been, I've been on the pathway around the south end of Lafarge Lake coming home, and it's dark out, and somebody on a black scooter wearing all black with earphones in comes ripping up behind my wheelchair, zips out in front of me, cuts me off, and I'm hollering at them and they can't hear me. It says right on these things that they're not allowed to be ridden on the sidewalk. And they're also not allowed to double on them. And I have seen numerous people, including parents with small children with no helmets on, riding these things. And that path is used by a lot of different people. There's pedestrians, there's people walking dogs, there's people teaching their kids to ride their little bikes. I've seen kids rollerblading, and it's a curvy path, and there's a lot of trees, and so there's a lot of blind corners. And if somebody's ripping along there at a fair clip, and they come around the corner and encounter any of these things, or even senior citizens on foot, there's potential for a bad accident. I don't think that they belong on sidewalks, and there's nothing being done to sort of monitor or prevent that from happening. The other issue is that young teens, mid-range teens are renting them using their parents' credit cards. And my thought is if they get into an accident, who's going to pay for that? ICBC is not covering e-bikes or e-scooters because they consider them bikes. And so they're like a vehicle, but there's no insurance on them. There's no rules around that. And so the companies that are providing them have some insurance, and you're covered sort of under that. But if you're using a parent's credit card and you're the one that causes the accident, how does that work? So there's I feel in some ways there's been very little thought given to, some of these issues. And I feel like we have to sort of, work with the city to try and create a better situation for everybody. Lots of people are looking to these as an affordable way to get around because gas is really expensive, and they're accessible in the community. They're everywhere. And so they're readily available for somebody that needs a quick ride somewhere. So I can understand people wanting to use them, and I have no issue with that. I just think that the way that they're being used is somewhat dangerous for everybody else. There was also some footage shot in the Global piece that was done that wasn't used on television. And while we were filming down by the SkyTrain station, 5 older teens pulled up on these scooters, and they were trying to lay tracks down on the sidewalk by, stopping them suddenly. And then they eventually took them up into the entrance of the SkyTrain station and were doing donuts in the station. And I wish that they had used that footage, because it gives you a good idea of the kinds of things that people are doing with them that are not what they're meant for. So, whether there's a way to limit the age of people using them, I feel like if you don't have a driver's license, perhaps you shouldn't be riding or renting them. Because at least then the basic rules of the road, and they belong on the road. You can ride them in the bike lanes. I've seen people doing that, but, every single day you see people doing things with them that you're not supposed to be doing.
I got into this story because I heard about you, and I, I I go for walks every morning, and every morning I consistently find at least three of these scooters blocking the way, and a lot of times totally blocking the sidewalk. And that really, when I thought about you, um, emotionally motivated me to go to City Hall, ask for a response from the mayor, ask for a response from the media liaison, ask for a response from the manager of the scooter program, ask for a response from the bylaw officer manager, and ask a response from engineering and planning in writing.
Mm-hmm.
That was several weeks back. And at this point, they will not allow any contact with them to discuss this issue. And I'm approaching the issue from a mobility and human rights perspective because, from my perspective, they have a duty to accommodate because you have mobility issues. I'm just wondering, I know how that makes me feel. I'm just wondering how that makes you feel.
Well, I have to say that when I had done the initial interview with the paper, that Matt, the city councilman, reached out to me and he said, I'd like to sit down with you and have a conversation. And good to his word, he showed up to my home last Friday and we sat and we talked for at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, about the situation. And he is in agreement with me that, there needs to be more monitoring and more thoughtfulness to how these are affecting our city. He has said to me that he has been trying to sound the alarm on this for some time. And I said, I'm willing to partner with you to make this something that we work on together because I feel it's important when citizens come to you and they say, hey, there's a problem in our city. You not only need to sit down with them and find out what exactly they're talking about and, what their perspective is and why, but also, what you can do about it. And I mean, in that conversation, multiple times they said to me, you know, we appreciate this feedback because we're not wheelchair users. We don't have disabilities. We don't know what it's like to live your life and have these experiences. And I appreciated the humility and the curiosity that they were able to, express. And also, when I say something personally, when there's a problem, I don't come just to complain. I come with solutions. I'm very solution based about my advocacy, and I feel like we're in a good place about it now that we've had this conversation. They've even asked me to come back on board for the Universal Accessibility Committee, which is the city committee that advises mayor and council on matters of accessibility and inclusion. I served on that committee several years ago for a couple of years, and then I moved out of Coquitlam, which was the reason why I didn't remain. And it actually, when we had our ribbon cutting, one of the people that had been chairing at that time came up and said, please come back on that committee. So, I think that they recognize that I've come to them with something that's valid, and that experience really colors my enjoyment of my everyday life. But it's not just for me. When I'm talking about these things with the city, it's about everybody. My neighbors that are disabled, that are using mobility aids, the seniors that are in the neighborhood that are, walking the paths where these things are flying by every day. So, I want it better for all of us. It's not just for me.
I completely agree, and they should be certainly speed limited by geolocation, which of course doesn't apply to private scooters. But Vancouver City just initiated their e-scooter program, and this problem with dockless systems worldwide has been a real problem. And there are numerous videos on YouTube about it. But Vancouver did something novel. They said, no, if we're going to have this system, it has to be docked. In other words, the scooter has to be returned to the place of origin. So I'm just wondering if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so I've learned a few things about the actual scooters and how they operate. One of the things is that on every single scooter, um, they have like the handlebar like this, and right in the center, there's a QR code that you can scan. It brings up a website where it asks you, do you want to report something? You hit yes, and then it gives you options about what you're reporting. And one of the options is bad parking. And so when you hit that, it tells the company that there's a problem. They figure out who the person was to last use it, and they get a warning. If it continues to happen, they're actually banned from renting. Um, they also have the ability to control the speed at which the rental ones travel. They have a GPS, and so they can create areas where you might travel that it slows down to a certain speed without you being able to control that. So that if you are on a path with other pedestrians, for example, that you wouldn't be able to just rip through that path, and be at risk of running people over. Wow, it's really raining now. um, Additionally, those mats are out there, so they're trying to put those in more areas, and they can see with the GPS where people have left them. Um, Apparently, if they badly park them, they will come out and move them. I don't know how often that happens because I've seen just on Lougheed Highway, near where the SkyTrain, the Coquitlam Central SkyTrain station is, on one of the pedestrian crossing areas on the island, somebody had left 3 of them the other day, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, right across the street is where the parking area is, and they can't be bothered, and they're leaving them on this tiny island so that people can trip over them trying to cross the street. So, you know, you can drive anywhere in this neighborhood and see them where they don't belong.
Yeah. With respect to reporting using the QR code, I talked to one lady in a walker, and I was telling her about that, and her immediate response was, "I wouldn't know how to do that." And from my perspective, a lot of people with mobility issues or sight issues aren't savvy like you are. So I'm just wondering if you think that's an effective solution, or what role would the city play in alleviating that um, condition and providing remedy?
Yeah, they don't advertise very well that you can report the scooters. I actually didn't know that until I talked to Global. But now I've been reporting them constantly. But you're right, older people may not be comfortable with the technology or know how to use it. And so for them, it's going to be really hard for them to make those reports, and they're going to be stuck in the meantime. I also am really concerned about people with visual disability because my best friend is visually impaired, and I know darn well if we were to go out together that I would have to be spotting for her to make sure that there weren't any lying across the path because she would never see them and she'd fall. So, and that's with me present, and I think, like, that's not practical for people with visual disabilities. They need to go about their lives, and they need to be able to do it relatively safely. So, I think about who are the most vulnerable people when something like this is happening, and how can we make it better for them? Because if we make it better for the most vulnerable people, then everybody will be safer.
I totally agree, because I've seen a visually impaired woman around my neighborhood with a white cane, and now when she goes out, she has to have somebody accompany her because of this, and that I find is not a good situation, and I wouldn't want to see anybody with vision impairment being injured because of this situation.
And if it's a senior, they could go over and break a hip, and then, that doesn't end well for most seniors.
Exactly. Is there anything that you would like to say to the city of Coquitlam, or just in closing, or?
I just feel like this is a problem. It's not just a problem for disabled people. I would urge anybody in the city who feels that this is, impeding their enjoyment of our city, affecting their ability to remain safe when they're out and about. Talk to your city councilors, show up at the meetings, make your voice heard, because this isn't just a disability issue, it's a citizen issue, and we all need to take responsibility, and there's strength in numbers. So if other people can speak up and be good allies for the disabled community, then we're all going to be better off. I think if you have a loved one who's disabled, or you have a loved one who's a senior citizen, if you're a mom with a baby stroller, anybody that's using mobility equipment, speak up. Let your voice be heard, because City Council has a duty to listen to its constituents, and we have to speak up if we want to make changes in our city. It's all of our responsibility.
Interesting that your experience has been very different than mine with Coquitlam City, because I've gotten no response, and I don't feel that's fair, because I'm a solutions-based person as well, having an engineering background myself. So, but in any case, thank you so much for inviting us into your home and discussing this issue. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, and I hope that we get some movement on this soon.
Indeed. Movement is the main thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Dave Noga reporting for Tri-Cities Community Television, and hopefully we find a solution to this problem.
The harder the rain was coming down, the harder it was for me to hear, because all I was hearing was that rain. Oh my God, that was loud.